The following episode might contain sensitive content that you might not be comfortable listening to. This will include topics such as self-harm, suicide, alcoholism. If any of these things or anything related might disturb you, please proceed with caution or click off the video now. Alright, so welcome back to another episode of the Only Rainy Days podcast. My name is Hazy, and I have a special guest this time. For the fourth episode, hopefully it's the fourth, I decided to do something a little bit different this time, which is have someone on with me, because I think that they will be able to add a little bit more to the conversation, and it won't just be me basically rambling with myself. You might recognize the name if you look through the comments and things and such, but today I will be having my audio engineer here with me. Their name is Mia. Mia, why don't you say some words? Why not?
Hi, my name is Mia. I'm a trans male to female. I do the audio editing for Only Rainy Days, and that's I'm not good at introductions, but that's the basis.
Yeah, so today I want to talk about calling it quits, which is necessarily the feeling of wanting to remove yourself, basically, in a slightly lighthearted but the worst way possible to address the situation. We're going to be talking about suicide, necessarily more suicidal urges, because it's something that I have dealt with, and from what I've heard, it's also something that Mia has dealt with. There's a common phenomenon in just regular culture and things like that. There's this thing called like the call of the void, which is just like, apparently, which is kind of shocking to me because I never realized until I looked up, regular people just kind of feel the urge to just do some random shit, to be completely blunt with it. Like, you know that feeling when you just like look over a bridge or something, you just be like, damn, I could just jump off right now. Apparently, that's a regular feeling. I didn't know that. I did not know.
Yeah,
that.
it's the I guess the urge where like you'll always just have that hypothetical in the back of your mind where you're sitting there like you're like staring off a high building, or you're like looking up at the sky and just wondering to yourself like, what would happen if one day I just fell and didn't get back up? Or like things where it's instances where it would basically be like it would result in your death. What would your instincts or your thoughts be on that, I guess?
Yeah, basically. I don't even know if people get that far. I don't know. Unfortunately, please tell me if your friends know this. Unfortunately, a lot of my friends already have like suicidal thoughts. So like, I haven't been able to just pull someone and just be like, actually, no, wait, my best friend, he is not suicidal, but he just tells me sometimes he'll just be like driving his car, for instance, and he'll just be like, what if I just swerved into oncoming traffic just for the hell of it, basically? Like, thoughts like that occur. I don't know if it necessarily goes as far as to wonder what would happen past death, but it is something that people just think about. They just wonder sometimes, like, what if I just took this action to just get out of it, basically, to put it in simple terms. It's like, it's just not worth it. I could just jump off this bridge.
I think it might have to do with like the hypothetical of just your mind just having nothing else better to think of, so it instantly goes to that thought process of like trying to think of something in the moment for people who don't have the thoughts normally. So it might just be like there's nothing to think about, so this is what the thought's going to be. Because sometimes I'll get that like in not suicidal ways where I'll just sit there for like a moment thinking about nothing, and something from like either years ago will pop up, or something about my general vicinity will just randomly pop up.
Do you think it's like thoughts more so like out of boredom? It's just like, I'm thinking of nothing right now, let me just wonder about this? Or do you think it's more like infatuation with life after death?
I think there's a sort of mixture of the two, where for some people it could be that mixture of just there's nothing better going on at the moment. what would happen if this happened. And then for some people, it's the thought process of life after death, like you said, where like some people are religious and they'll assume whatever happens when they die with their religion, or other people will just be like, what would happen in the hypothetical that like I swerved into oncoming traffic, or if I took the jump, and they're like not suicidal thoughts, like those are just like people's natural thoughts.
See, that's kind of crazy because now that I think about it, that's like, at least personally, that's how my own thoughts started to occur a little bit. Like, it's like general anxiety and things like that. Like, you'll be young and like, you know, like a parent's car, or just like the bus to go to school, and you'll just wonder like, damn, something could just go wrong right now, and it's just out of my control. And I feel like that thought kind of evolved itself as I got older, and it went from just being like something bad could happen to just like, well, technically death is just like a quote unquote escape from what I'm feeling. And I think the moment my brain linked that thought together, it kind of ruined me. I think that my brain finally doing what it was supposed to do and linking those two together just like completely ruined how I saw life for a bit, because it just went from death, this like overbearing, scary thought where like everything I felt and have done and experienced, people that I know, just kind of disappears. So it's just like, at the same time, everything that's making me feel this way could quote unquote just disappear if I was to just remove myself from this plane of being. Man.
Like the theme of escapism, kind of.
Yeah, it's basically escapism, because it's just like some stuff, a lot of stuff happens that you can't necessarily control. And I guess when I was younger, my brain just immediately assumed, well, I don't have to feel it or feel like the tension of thinking that I should be in control of this thing that's bothering me if I was to just take the steps to remove myself 100% from the situation. It's like the same as having those feelings of wanting to run away from home or anything. Even if it's just problems that you're having at school, you just think, well, I'm just not going to go to school today, or I'm just never going to go back to school. I think it's like an evolution on those thoughts as well. It's just realize that if you're not there to experience it, then quote unquote it must just be better, and you just kind of ignore all the other things, all the other positives that you might be missing out on, because all you want to do is get the negatives away from you.
Yeah.
You know?
Like
Man,
the whole concept of escapism is, I think, like a big part of also like just in general suicidal thoughts, because the whole idea of it is you want to escape the pain as quickly as you can in like the most efficient way that you can think of at the moment. And it's irrational thinking. Like, it's always going to be like irrational thinking if you think like that, but it's like in those moments you're not thinking about like the rational thoughts, you're thinking about how do I get rid of this problem as soon as I can, kind of.
yeah, because it's just it's like anxiety and all that. Like, what you don't know sometimes if this problem's just going to disappear. Like, I might be wrong, but I'd imagine like if you have a bad grade in the class, you wouldn't just be like, all right, well, I'm just never going to go back to school, or at least it wouldn't be like that intense. But if you're dealing with like problems in like your household or just your family in general, between your friends, someone's bullying you at school, or just any combination of the sorts, you just like, this problem exists. It has existed for some time, and there's not really a clear idea on when this problem's going to stop. And since I can't predict when it will stop, if it would, this must clearly be my best decision. My best decision is to just pull this random exit card out of my pocket. And even thinking of the exit card and truly considering it, you kind of doom yourself to feel like you're almost relying on it. Like, did you ever have those feelings where it's just like you start to feel less stressed about what's going on around you because you already feel somewhat comfortable with the idea of death?
Yeah, I've had that a couple times before, mostly varying times during high school. It would be I'd have moments where my mind would kind of be made up on the I want to do it kind of prospect of it, but I never
Hmm.
actually had the prospect of attempting to do it. But I'd always have that like lingering feeling that if I ever did end up attempting it, I would just like there wouldn't be any hesitancy towards it.
When was the first time that you ever felt those feelings? I guess, like, when was the first time you realized, like, oh no, like, I don't fear death in the way that I used to, or I quote unquote should feel about death?
The first time it happened was roughly around middle school because I remember I had a group of friends that I used to hang out with, and I think at one point they started getting annoyed with me. So over time, they started to slowly kind of push me out of the group, and I made like a really dumb decision at one point to kind of like bring it up to them at one point, and it just kind of ended up causing like a major rift in the group. And the instant that happened, I straight up said like, "This wouldn't have happened if I just wasn't here. Like none of this problem would happen if I just wasn't here. Maybe it would fix itself if I left." And it's the idea that like because I'm in middle school, not thinking with an actual brain. I'm thinking with whatever a middle schooler's brain would be the equivalent for. So I'm sitting there thinking in my head, if I remove myself from the situation as like the best I can, which would be just never showing up again, like vanishing off the face of the earth kind of deal, that it would sort of magically fix all the problems.
Wait, wait. Do you mean like, I, can you think of like a grade? Because that's like middle
Like
school's kind
eighth
of
grade.
insane. Eighth grade. Okay, I could go for eighth grade. Okay, because in my head I was thinking that it was just like sixth, seventh grade or something like that. I can't. I don't think I've ever had feelings like those in sixth or seventh grade. I think eighth grade is like, eighth grade was the start of the downfall, and then it all hit me like a truck in between eighth and ninth grade. Oh, eighth grade though, Jesus.
Yeah, that's roughly around like the same period it would work for me too, because it was well, not work for me, but you know what I mean. Like eighth, ninth, those are like the two grade levels where like because I think it has to do mainly with development and like your brain.
Yeah,
It's when your brain is starting to sort of develop more into the idea of, I guess, emotion and like trying to think rationally in times. But the problem is you are a high schooler who has barely any information on the outside world outside of like the school environment and like hanging out with your friends. So your brain's going to instantly assume dumb things are rational versus dumb things are irrational for different purposes.
so like when those problems started to like arise, and you said like removing yourself is feels like the best thing you could do, did your mind not necessarily jump to like, just imagine if you weren't their friends to begin with, or did it just immediately jump to a worst case scenario, just like if I wasn't here to begin with, over and over, then that would be just
It,
the best
it
that
went
would
it
happen?
went straight to worst thing at the time.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Uh, did those feelings like persist, or like, not necessarily if those feelings persisted, but like, did that like overall theme of realizing or falsely realizing that removing yourself in that context might be a good idea, that like kind of transfer over throughout the years, or was there like any other things that kind of spawned that type of thought? If you're willing to share, I don't want to force.
So I think over time it evolved to an extent where like it started to affect a lot of my actual friendships that I made past that, because my brain would go to the idea that if I wasn't here, maybe certain scenarios that happen in my friend group, like arguments or like sort of break-offs, wouldn't have happened, because sometimes I would feel like I'm the catalyst even when I'm not the catalyst of them. And it
Mm.
was even to the extent that like the last major friend group I had before the one that we have now, I had a very similar thought then, if that makes sense.
Was it like fully similar in the sense that you felt like you were starting to be somewhat shunned out of the group, or was it just this feeling of like you don't fit in, and then that thought just kind of forced itself in?
The idea that if I wasn't there, maybe X, Y, and Z wouldn't have happened, and A, B, and C would have happened instead.
So it comes more from a feeling that I wouldn't say, well, I guess just for simplicity, you feel like you somehow could figure out a way to blame yourself for certain events that arised.
Yeah, it would be a lot of like self blame on events that realistically I wouldn't have actually had reason to think I'm a part of for certain situations.
Mm. Has those feelings ever gotten better, at least in context of just between you and your friends and what transpired, or is that still?
With them, I eventually kind of got the idea that removing myself physically wouldn't have helped at all, because I think it was more so the group itself started to die down, not exclusively I was annoying, therefore group broke. So in that specific scenario, at least, I don't think so, but I do still have the thought in certain places, I guess.
Hmm. So there's a little bit of clarity, but it's still. I mean, situation like this always seems like it's going to be somewhat murky.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't expect perfect clarity, but at least there's some type of, I guess, closure would be the best word. There's some type of closure when it comes to that type of thing. That's good to hear, honestly. A lot of things don't feel like they get closure, or at least by the time closure shows up, it's too late necessarily.
Yeah.
The thoughts already sink in and they make a place for themselves in your own home. And it's just like, I can't get rid of it because this is just, I'm so used to the feeling and things like that. That's not good. I'm trying to think what really spawned like my first feelings for that type of thing. Because I know it wasn't 8th grade. I know it wasn't 8th. And definitely not beforehand. If I was to say, I think it was just home problems. I really think that was it. I think it was just home problems, and not even from a sense of like I'm the problem, but more so just not wanting to be around it anymore to begin with.
Like parents arguing, just family infighting kind of thing, like just you don't want to be in the vicinity of it.
Just fighting basically. It never it never really involved me or anything like that. If it ever involved me, it was because of like, what do you call it? The weird and very shitty thing people in quote unquote power do, where they try to find leverage wherever they can. So like because it's between like people in my household, sometimes they'll just bring up whoever. So like I might hear something that's either me or close to me thrown into the mix of the problem. And even if it's just used for like trying to find a solution, or they're just using my name or something to get out of whatever's happening, trying to calm each other down, it's just like, even just being used as leverage in any sense made me feel really bad. And just hearing it in general just made me feel really bad. But I was only 13 going into freshman year. So there's not even just, at 13, there's not even a thought of just like, okay, what if I was to just go and leave and do something? Like, I realized that like I know nothing, I have nothing. There is no option to just kind of run for the hills and pray that it works. I wouldn't know where to go, what to do. I got nothing to me. Like if there isn't just some like insane luck, I'll just end up back where I was, or I'll just end up dead. And I was just, that second part was just like, when I just realized, like, okay, well, that must be, if it seems like it all circles back to that, then that must just be,
Then it must be the answer, kind of.
The answer, or I guess what it just will happen to be, whether it be my choice or not. I just realized this is like, it's all going to circle back to this. And the first path is just kind of a roundabout way of getting to the same endpoint. So there's no point in trying to delay it. Like this is just what's going to happen if nothing changes. And I just kind of sat down and just took the time to realize, like, well, I guess this is the case. If nothing changes and I hit my breaking point, then I just have to do this, because there's nothing else I can do, really. But I guess luckily I never hit that breaking point, because I always found a way to push back that idea of a breaking point. I can make reasons and arguments in my head as to why, even if it continuously escalated, I shouldn't throw in the towel for some reason, even if I previously defined what would be worse, whether it be it happens again or it gets quote unquote worse in whatever definition I could find. It's louder, more violent, brings up this topic and this topic, whatever it might be. I just always was, I guess it's just the general hesitancy, or just being hesitant in general, because I don't know if that's the word, but I was just still somewhat uncomfortable with the idea of going through with that to an extent, because I did try to go through with it, and as we are sitting here, we can all tell it did work. I just made the last second decision to jump back on how I felt. Like, you know how people say commonly, like, oh, before you die, you see your life flash before your eyes?
Yeah, like the like your life just like plays them fast forward.
Yeah. I got something like that. It wasn't necessarily memories. It was some memories and things that happened, but I more felt it's what helped me realize what I could be missing if I chose to go down this path 100%. And that fear and uncertainty that I felt already going into it is what led me to actually somehow find a way to jump back on what I did before it was too late. Like, man, that's gonna be dark as hell. There's this bar that like randomly hangs from a part of my basement, and a lot of people in the house just use it for pull-ups. I remember tying something to the bar and I jumped. And when all those thoughts started to kick in, I remember grabbing the bar and just like pulling myself up, and literally like wrap my legs around it like it was like a monkey bar you should find at a playground. And I just sat up there close enough to it until I could undo the knot. And I just hopped off, because that was like, this is probably, I don't want to go through with this anymore. It felt like a good idea going into it, even though I know now obviously it's a terrible idea from the start. But I went into it with my mind made up, and midway I was just like, this isn't it. There's something that I might be missing out on, something that I'm not. There's something that I'm just missing here. And to go through with this, which is just throw everything in the trash. All the work I've put in, all the work other people have put in, but to just focus purely on myself, just all the work I put in, my friends, everything. It's all for nothing. And it still could get better. It's the optimism in all of us that keeps us away from this indefinite decision to take an exit. So when I got that moment, I was just like, I'm going to see where it takes me.
So I'm not sure if I've ever hit the point where, like, I fully went through with trying a method. I would brainstorm methods in my head for different things at the time. But I think the worst I've ever had it would have to be, and I'm gonna keep the person that this is relating to entirely anonymous because I don't want any hate going towards them, even though they did kind of royally burn me in the end. I'm not the kind of person that wants to go after them. So my last relationship wasn't as hunky-dory or clean as I personally wanted to believe it was from the start. And it was always, like, it had ups and downs. We both fucked up at multiple points in time, stuff like that. I was on Google looking up basically suicide methods and completely ignoring the whole, like, because there are websites that will list suicide methods, but they'll say they're only for informational purposes, and if you have problems, call this hotline. I was ignoring the hotline. I just wanted, like, the quickest way out. Genuinely felt like it was too much of a burden on my conscience that I thought the easiest way out would be, like, slitting my wrist in a bathtub or, like, overdosing on Tylenol or something. And I remember the only reason I didn't do that was because, like, the only reason I didn't go through with anything was because I lived with my sister at the time because we all still lived in our old house back in California. And I live with her now still because we moved, but the entire thing is I didn't care what my parents would think. I didn't care what my brother would think. I didn't care what anyone else in the world was going to think if they saw my corpse. I couldn't bear the thought of making her see me like that because my sister is one of the few people that I think I'm closest with on the planet. So the thought process of having her having to see what I would have been just killed me on the inside to the point where I would just bear the trauma. Kind of.
Therapists exist for a reason. They're, I like to call them the world's best question askers because, I mean, something that they can do to change what happened, but they do help you accept.
I think I was repressing it for the longest time. I only started addressing it earlier this year, for lack of a better term, because I'd start sort of writing down, like, little vent messages in my private server that I have on Discord, where I'd use it like a diary, kind of. Because it's only a channel I can see, and I'm just typing out whatever thoughts come to my head at the moment and just letting it ride out, kind of.
Yeah, no, trust me, I feel that. I'm a big advocate for writing all thoughts down because it helps, doesn't it? It just helps to see everything from a point that isn't trying to just think about it.
For me, I think it's just being able to let it out somewhere, even if it's not to somebody else. Just letting the thoughts out kind of helps a lot with that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, talking to someone about it is also, or just talking about, just get it out your head. It's just like the main thing about it. It's just like at the very least, even if you don't feel like you're comfortable talking about it to someone, especially talking to someone about it with the sake of addressing it and trying to find closure about it, just not having it swirl around your head 24/7 helps, because you can just look back at what you said and then you can, once you at least read it or hear it back from someone, then you can like start to pick apart the other things that were happening during it and around it. And then, I mean, once it's all on paper and once it's all said, then you can truly like start to try to process it, I guess. Accept it has this weird connotation that it doesn't bother you anymore necessarily. So I won't use it, but at least you can process what happened. And then, I mean, the lack of processing something that happened is usually what is the cause of people going off the deep end. That's just a general statement of going off the deep end. People go manic, psychotic. I think it was basically the two. People start to lose their minds because they don't process something or don't process it fast enough, or just too much piles on top of it. And it's just like, I can't think straight. So everything's just going to take a fault for it. So yeah, no, processing it and writing down, talking to someone or both is very, very important when it comes to quite literally anything that's bothering you. Honestly, I don't think there's anything not worth writing down as long as it makes you feel a type of way. Like shit, I write down sometimes. I need to write it down just so I remember back. I remember like the peak, or whenever I start to hit a peak in like mental health deterioration, I would literally write down on my calendar like once a week. It will send me like a notification or like a reminder, clean your room, just because I know that I can just stare at a mess and just not care to clean it, or I won't focus on this one specific thing unless something tells me directly to deal with it. Like, because I've had I was working at Amazon for the last 3 months.
3 months or so.
About I think I made it 3 months. There has been a backlog of laundry that I have not done in that entire time that I was working. And every time I tell myself, oh, you'll do it this weekend, and the weekend comes and I just don't do it because I have nothing just like strictly tells me like, oh, you need to do it. It's just a thought in my head, and because it's only a thought, it just passes. If I actually wrote it down,
it like comes in one way, goes out the other.
Yeah, because it doesn't even come in. It's just like, if you think about the cycle of it coming in, going to the brain, then coming out, it was just straight from the brain out. So I'd stare at it and I look at it, but it's too late because I only see it when I'm going to bed, and my mind's already made up on my next action. So I'm not gonna do anything else, and I just go to bed anyway. And I'll tell myself I'll deal with it later, and then I don't. And it's the same. That's like the same cycle that I've been trapped in because I chose not to write down a lot of the feelings that I was having. I think of 5 different things that were bothering me, or 5 different aspects of this one thing that was bothering me, and I get lost in how much is on my mind, and then I can only focus on one of them, and I might not even solve the first thing I'm thinking of, and I don't solve it, and I'm really not about to move on to anything else, and it just gets scuffed. It just gets really bad. But I guess the most important question to ask now, at least, and be honest or don't, or sure choice, do you think you've, I don't want to say move on because of the context, but necessarily, do you think you've overcame that feeling that death is an outcome that you should lean on immediately? I think immediately is the key word. Like, do you at least try to consider other things before it gets to that? Or do you feel like you still just kind of go straight to this idea that death removes you from a situation immediately?
I think overall it does depend on what the situation itself is, but more times than not, I think my first thought always goes back to, if I disappeared, would it be better? It wouldn't stay, but it would always be the first thought that comes to mind whenever like some majorly bad happens. And it's not like for every bad thing that happens. It's mainly just like the big fuck ups that come out. Like my first thought is, if I was gone, would this have changed anything? And if yes, then that starts to kind of break back down into that whole side issue of the suicidal thoughts and all that.
So what about if you feel like your lack of appearance wouldn't change anything? Like this was quote unquote bound to happen regardless. Is that still a thought, or does it?
If it's bound to happen, I think I've gotten out of the hole of thinking I should still disappear. I like to think at least that I don't resort to it in situations that obviously would have happened regardless. It's mostly situations that occur with me as one of the forebearers or one of the catalysts for it, I guess, is the easier way to put it.
I guess because of the statements that she said, it's a little rough to ask this question, but at least in terms of situations that have happened in the past, so you can look back on them and try to reflect and see it from a different lens now. Do you still feel like, to an extent, you were like the absolute reason that something as such happened? Not exactly, but something similar would have happened? Or have you come to a point where you might realize that there's a chance that this would have happened even if I wasn't involved to begin with?
To an extent, yes. No, I don't want to say like entirely, but in terms of the friend groups, I think, yeah, I'm still on that front of, like, if I'm there, then I'll still have something.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Honestly, I mean, honestly, I don't know if I could say in some contexts, yeah, actually, I'm in the same boat. With some things, I feel like it wouldn't have changed. And in some contexts, I feel like it would be. But do you ever get the feeling that you think it would have been worse without you,
Um, it's not a lot, but I have had the feeling before where, like, if I wasn't there, something bad would have happened, kind of thing.
though? I get that. I get that feeling a lot, honestly. And that's just because of my surprisingly, quote unquote, I mean, it might be surprising to you just based on the context of how you know me, but in terms of how some other people see me, I usually just avoid a lot of things. But when it comes to conflict, I get very hot-headed, brash, and sometimes I assert myself into situations that I quote unquote don't have business in. And sometimes it makes it better, and sometimes I feel like it might make it worse, at least in the future. It might make it worse. So it makes it excessively hard to determine if my presence was worth it. Because it's really hard to put a gauge on people and how people interact with other people in general. It's really hard to just sit there and be like, I don't know if I did good or I don't know if I did bad. Like, and even if the bad didn't happen now, if it happens again, did my interaction beforehand kind of make it worse this time? Because they know that it might happen again, or just what transpired. Like I have a lot of questions in my head, to keep it very simple, when it comes to these type of thoughts and these type of things. How to get out of it, though? How do we get out of this type of feeling? Do you see an escape necessarily?
Personally, I don't know if I have like a surefire get out of jail option for every time I feel it. But I do know that one of the things that at least keeps me hooked on to the idea of not committing to it is the thought process of what would this person think if I did pass, because like an end of the day I don't want to be someone who, because suicide is a selfish thing, but like for lack of a better way to explain it, it is kind of a selfish way out. Like if we're not
You see it
sugarcoating,
as selfish?
I don't, selfish to an extent. I don't want to say like purely selfish, because there are situations where I will think that it's a better option for
Mm.
everyone. But most of the time that thought comes with the idea that you're escaping, not the thought of how would it make everyone around you feel. And that's always, it's specifically with how my sister would feel that kind of keeps me hooked on to the idea that I shouldn't go through with it. And I think that's kind of been what's been grounding me for a while. I've been getting better at it, mentally speaking.
Mm.
But end of the day, if the intrusive thoughts, for lack of a better term, do end up winning and beating me, my sister is kind of like the last resort holding me back.
So, do you see a situation where that feeling starts to subside, independent of anyone else? Or do you just see it as this just might be what it is, at least for the moment, and we'll just have to see what we can do if that time comes? So, like, do you think you're more grounded here because of the people that you have around you, or just grounded in life itself?
I'm more grounded in the idea of the people than I am life itself at the moment, because it has boiled down to, like, one of the first thoughts I'll have if I ever do have those feelings is how would my friends, how would my sister, how would my family react to this happening to me? Like if they walked into my room one day, saw a note, and saw me in the corner like bleeding out or something. It's always like, I guess my first thought always goes back to how are my family taking it? How are my friends going to take it if I were to go through with an action that isn't reversible, kind of thing.
Mm.
So I do think I am still very on the dependent part.
Do you think anything could necessarily happen to get out of that, or do you just, or are you just, or at least I guess, have you found closure, quote unquote, that might just be your reality? Because I think it's fine, honestly, if that's your reality, but I think it should just be at least defined.
I do think I have accepted the point that the only thing that is going to keep me here are the people that I'm in relationships with, and it's why I'm both scared and like happy to be in relationships with people, or just like friendships or
Mm.
whatever, because I have like the trust issues that one day someone's going to leave me and then I'm just going to be left alone to my thoughts again, and the thoughts are going to win. So that's why I'm really like, I'm not a social person, but I'll always be around in like a call with somebody or waiting for somebody, because I always have the thought process in my head that as long as I'm with somebody, then I guess things are going to turn out fine.
That makes sense. And I mean, I don't think I can agree anymore, but I definitely used to share that type of sentiment very strongly. Could I say necessarily who? I don't think there's really, I mean, there's obviously weighting to everything, but I don't think there's been like a sole individual more than just an idea of individuals that kept me like that. But I definitely get the sentiment. I don't even think I've gotten out of it. I don't even think I got into the other side of just being like, life is beautiful, smell the roses, and the other 101 things people say to each other just to try to avoid the general conversation to begin with. I don't think I've gotten to that point. I don't think the idea of someone else here has kept me here anymore. I think I'm just doing my absolute best to try to figure out what would make me solely happy, and just recognizing what I'm willing to sacrifice to try to finally figure out what makes me and solely me happy has pushed me away from that mindset that I want to try to make sure I'm here for the sake of someone else. I think I took that mindset too far. I think I focused too much on trying to make sure if the people around me were happy, and I started to deprive myself even harder from it. So I finally figured out, or I just finally distanced myself from that type of mindset. But I still don't think it's a bad one, though. If it works in that context, I think it should just be celebrated and praised, honestly.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Well, quite honestly, I think I'm running out of context. Not context. I think I'm just running out of things to say here. So is there anything that you want to bring up, talk about, questions, etc., etc.?
Nothing else, no.
I don't think I got anything else. So with that, I think the only thing that's 100% important to say is I think it's very important to process the things that go on in your life, how you feel about what's going on, what has happened, and I guess even to what you might fear or expect to happen in the future. Take it at face value. Stay away from abstract rumination, trying to figure out necessarily what might happen without a basis of what actually has happened. So even if you have a fear that someone might do something, if there's no concrete proof or statements in your head where you can be like, this has happened, that's abstract rumination. So I think straying away from that, taking in everything that happened, and most importantly, try to figure out necessarily what keeps you here. Because I think the moment that you figure out what keeps you here, find your flame so that you can keep it burning, whatever it might be. If your flame is someone else, find out a way to keep your flame going and keep their flame going as well. Check up on them constantly. If your flame is just yourself, figure out what keeps your flame ignited and see how can we fuel it and things as such. That way you can avoid calling it quits.